Gotcha. And hi, Mike.
It'll take it a few minutes to get started, but it's working on it.
Yeah. I like your periodic table background.
Okay, so Terry, when you're putting it on YouTube, because I'm getting a message from Zoom, the meeting's being live streamed, but that's because it's on YouTube?
Yeah.
Okay, so do I not need to record it?
You can record it. We can get 2 recordings. Zoom will keep one, YouTube will keep one.
Okay.
Yeah, I got it. It's on.
Okay, so we're live on YouTube, guys.
Terry, when you put it on YouTube, because I'm getting a message from Zoom, the meeting.
I didn't catch that, Mike. Howdy.
Hello.
We've got Sean coming in and Michael Sachs.
Oh, no, I ain't going out. I'm breaking out of habits. I have to go get some. But there's no way I'd make it through a meal. I'm like, I got bumps all over. Because it'll take a few days for it to affect your body.
Joyce, looks like you can start in 3 minutes if you're ready.
Okay.
Circulatory, you know.
What I could do is put up the, okay, Terry, have you taken away my screen sharing?
No, you should still be able to share your screen.
It said host disabled participant screen sharing.
Let me give it back to you then. Okay. Your co-host, Joyce.
Okay, yeah.
Jamie is going to be co-host.
Let's see here.
Whoa. Heavy seas. I see where there's chairs off to the side.
I think if you want to, you raise it up.
Okay, people can look over start looking over the minutes. I'll move to the next page shortly. While we're kind of waiting to get started. All right, I'm gonna move on down. All right, anybody want more time? Okay. All right, I'll stop sharing. Okay, so we will get started. It's 7:30, and this is kind of a different meeting because I have COVID, and so I can't be there. Jamie is getting over COVID and can't be there. So we're kind of, hopefully we've got it worked out. Luckily with Terry's help, Terry is there, and hopefully it's going to be okay. But this will, please excuse us if anything is a little bit wonky because it's kind of crazy. Okay, so first let's see if we have any new members or guests, anybody who wants to introduce themselves and say hi.
How do you do?
Yes, hi.
My name is Joe. I live in Manhattan.
Yeah.
And, I decided since my family's gonna come down in next April, 2 years from now, share the eclipse with you all, that I would start to support your organization, meet some
Okay.
friends, and get to know what you're all about. I'm a member of the New York Astronomy Association for about 50 years. And I'm a telescope maker, lens grinder. And I look forward to meeting you all. And I've never been to Austin, let alone Texas. So we're looking forward to it and we're excited to see you all.
Okay, well, thank you. Welcome. And yes, we are working on what we're going to do for the eclipse, which is not actually just about a year and a half because it's April 2024.
2024. Right.
Time flies, but yeah.
Yeah, we hiked the Appalachian Trail last year, and several years ago we were doing the Pacific Crest Trail, and we went over to Lyme, Oregon, to see the eclipse there. And now the kids are a little older, and they love to see it. And more importantly, I think we'd love to see Austin. So we're excited.
Great. Well, welcome. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
You're
Good
welcome.
to be here.
Anybody else on Zoom or in the room? Okay, I had the minutes up. Did anybody have any corrections on those? No. Okay. We'll move forward then to officer reports. Jamie.
Hey there, guys. Sorry for the scratchy throat. But let me see. I was just getting some information about, well, several of us got a chance to go to see that Goodnight Oppie documentary last week. And that was where yours truly, who was already infected with COVID and didn't know it, brought it to share with more folks like Joyce. You're welcome. And the event itself was awesome. It was a lot of fun. And I had reached out through a couple of folks there, publicists or whatever they were, to see if we could get Becca Sosland Siegfried to come and speak to our group. She's actually a graduate of Fredericksburg High School, just some years back, and she is now involved in what is her actual title? She's like one of the mission directors to working on the rovers on Mars. So anyway, should be really awesome. Hopefully we can get her to come and talk to us. And meanwhile, tonight, well, I'm going to introduce him in a minute, but meanwhile, we have the Christmas party coming up next month, and we will be sending out specific details to folks as we get closer. It's at a member's home. We're kind of keeping it a little on the DL just because we're not wanting to, broadcast to the public at large where it's going to be. But that should be fun. And then in January, God willing, and the snowstorms don't come to Chile, Dawn is going to be going down there as the ambassador educator in Chile program representative, and she's going to come back and talk to us all about it in the January meeting. So that should be really awesome. And also Finkelstein, sorry, names, things
Stephen.
elude me, but anyway, got a couple of good possibilities lined up for the beginning of next year. So hang on, it'll be awesome. My apologies also to Robert for not being able to make it. I was looking forward to seeing you again, and you're our first in-person speaker in quite some time. So I'm sorry to miss it. But
Things happen. It's okay.
thanks, guys.
Okay. Any questions for Jamie? Okay, treasurer, Sean, I think you're there.
I am here. Are you going to share the treasury report, or shall I do that?
I do not have it. I couldn't get it.
Okay, let me go ahead and share my screen.
All right. I'll need to mark you for that.
Oh, I already am.
Oh, you are? Okay.
Yeah, you should be able to see my screen now.
Yes, yes.
Nice.
Okay, great. So this is our October report, and it's pretty typical. We got good revenue for the month, and our expenses were not too bad. We're up to $24,000 total savings. And our membership numbers are still good. We're over 400 member accounts and over 500 active memberships. So that's great. What'll happen is over the next couple of months, we're going to start hitting more expenses, and then our expenses are going to start exceeding our income. By the end of the year, by the end of our budget, if expenses go according to plan, then we'll be about $6,000 behind. So we can see that here in our budget, that our net loss is going to be $6,000 by the end of the year if everything goes as planned. And that's the treasurer report.
Okay. Any questions for Sean? And we'll talk more about money in under new business in a little while. Okay, let's see. All right, Terry, did you just, two people were in the waiting room. Did you admit them?
Sure.
Okay, okay, now I see where they are. Okay, but if I can do it. I got it here.
Oh, I had been letting them in, but for some reason that didn't show up.
It's okay. All right, let's see. Let me go back here to the agenda. I guess our next officer is Terry, Communications.
I think we had a little delay on the line, Joyce. Who's up next?
You,
Me?
yeah, Communications.
Yeah, so I'll do the communications chair report. Not a lot to report. The biggest activity I'm working on now is coming back up to speed with a software package for nonprofit operations called Little Green Light. It looks like one of the better candidates for us to replace Wild Apricot with. I have not been very active due to being forced to care for my wife after an accident, but things are coming around now, so I hope to start working on it in earnest over the next couple of weeks. And we'll report back to you in January of what we think we can do with it.
Okay. Any questions for Terry? Okay, equipment, is Greg here?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Not a lot of activity this month other than continuing to work on the tear down of the 12 by 12 building for the dome. Not doing any work party this weekend, but I'd like to try to get as many volunteers as possible for next weekend, so we can take down the 4 walls and finish that. And then after that, we can look at options for the roll-off observatory.
Okay. And one of those options is, I think we mentioned this last month, that to see if anybody wants to buy it. So you'll hear more about that. Okay.
I'm sorry, say again?
I said, one of the options is if we could sell it to somebody, and
Right.
we'll get out more information about that.
Right.
Okay. Any questions for Greg? Okay, Chris Bernhardt couldn't be here this evening, so I will do a member services report for him. He, we've been talking about, and there was, in my article in the newsletter that came out today, we've been talking about starting up a Central Texas Star Party again, which is, we used to do it at Canyon of the Eagles. It's a 2-night event, observing event for members, and with some socialization and some meals and all that. So he's working with Pedernales Falls on getting that scheduled for the weekend of April the 15th of 2023. There'll be more information going out, but you can keep that in mind. We're going to get back to doing our weekend, our observing weekend. So the other thing he wanted me to tell you was that there is a member star party at Pedernales on the 26th of November. He can't be there. We've decided that we will not make it a real formal one. We're not going to have anybody who's necessarily the host. We're not going to try to have program, anything like that, but it will be available for members to go out and do their own observing on the evening of the 26th, which is a Saturday after Thanksgiving. Is Ed, are you here, Ed? I guess not. Okay. Ed LaBelle, outreach. I'll just mention that tomorrow night there is a star party at Inks Lake State Park, and we're trying out a new location. And any of you who have been to Inks Lake know that there was a light problem. There was just too much traffic around the area where we were. So we've made arrangements with the park staff to be closer to the lake and in an area where it can be blocked off so nobody can park there. And we think it's going to be a whole lot better with a lot fewer light problems, and hope that this is going to encourage more people to go out there, because we've had some big crowds at Inks Lake and not as many people, not as many volunteers as at Pedernales Falls. So we're hoping that this will encourage people to come out when they're going to not have to fight with the lights quite so much as they have been. Okay, Dawn is as our Alcor, and she is out of town. Let's see, Nathan, I don't know if you're here. Well, the newsletter came out today. I'm not sure that Jake is here, our webmaster, but he's been, he got the Discord going, and we really have got quite a few people on Discord, and I'm seeing a lot of messages on that. Let's see, any members at large have anything that they want to report? No? Okay, I'm moving along. Have I missed any officers? I guess not. Okay. New business. As we've been saying, the EC has been saying for the last couple of months, and as Sean was alluding to in his report, we have been spending a lot of money at both Bad Wolf Ranch and Pedernales, and our reserves have been going down, and we need to figure out a way to have our income match our expenses a little bit. We're attempting, the EC, to cut down on certain expenses, website expenses and equipment storage expenses, but some extra income would be helpful. I've been in the club for 16 years, and the dues have not gone up in that period of time. And there's not a whole lot of other things that you can say that is true of. So the EC is proposing that we have a new due schedule. We did the survey, and there was a lot of support for the idea of dues being higher. So that is what we are proposing. And let me get the my thing that I have that will tell us what the numbers are. Let me find it here. Here we go. Okay. Can you see that? Is that showing?
We're still seeing your agenda.
Let me stop that and then go back to the other. I'm still trying to figure out Zoom every time I'm on here, so. Okay. Figure out how to share. It's not, I'll go back to Zoom and. Okay. There we go. Okay. Junior, senior, and student dues would go from $15 to $20. Regular dues would go from 25 to 40. Household, which is up to 6 people, would go from 40 to 60, and senior household would go from 28 to 30. Are there any questions or comments?
This is per year.
Per year, right.
Do we have to vote on this or?
Yeah, we're gonna vote.
Okay.
I'm just seeing if we have any questions or comments at this point.
I have one, Joyce, if I may.
Yes, Ron.
Yeah, I didn't get to see the treasurer's report that much, but where are most of our anticipated expenses next year going to be that'll run us $6,000 behind?
A lot of them, we have over $2,500 going to the website, to Wild Apricot, and that keeps going up every year. We have a lot of things in storage, and those expenses keep going up every year. Sean, are you still here? Can you add to what I've said?
Yeah, I can. I'll go ahead and share my screen again so we can look at the budget one more time.
Let me stop and you can have it.
We've got a couple other questions coming up on chat. One is, what are the qualifications for seniors and students?
Okay. I'll get to that in a minute. Let's let Sean talk about the budget here.
So here in the budget, you can see what the big expenses are. We start out with $1,300 for the storage facility. We've got a lot of telescopes and they have to be protected, and that's why they're in storage. We anticipate spending little over $3,100 on the Bad Wolf Ranch capital expenses. We have to pay $2,700 in website expenses. We have a $2,000 insurance expense. That's for our liability and our equipment insurance. And those are the main big pieces of budget.
Okay.
Well, I'm satisfied with that.
All right, and let me look at the chat. What the question in the chat is.
How do we define senior and student?
Oh, senior is 65 and older. Student is 18 and above. Junior applies to kids that are under 18 who are probably students in high school or middle school or whatever. But the 18 and above student is meant mainly to apply to college students. Okay. Any other questions or comments?
If we're ready to take a vote, I'll make a proposal that we take a vote here in the room first, and then we take a vote for our Zoom members. And the method for voting is just to raise your hand in the reactions down there.
Okay.
We'll count how many hands we've got.
Okay.
So go ahead. Take a vote here in the room. Everybody here who is an AAS member. Do you approve of this new structure? Everybody in favor? Raise a hand. Nobody's opposed. Okay, count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
Okay. We do, by the way, have a quorum. Just I wasn't sure we were going to, but we had a bunch of people.
Yeah, we got 20 participants on Zoom. So if you want, if you approve of raising the changing the due structure, go down to reactions on the bottom there and raise your hand.
Okay.
1, 2, 3,
4, 5, 6,
7,
8,
9, 10,
9,
11.
10, 11, 12, 13. I get
13.
13. Okay. All opposed?
Everybody take your hand gesture there.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody opposed?
Count 1, 2, no, 1.
No, no, not opposed. Sorry.
I think maybe somebody hadn't taken their hands down.
All right.
I don't.
Last chance to oppose it. If you oppose it in the reactions, raise your hand. Not seeing anybody.
Okay. So it passes unanimously. Thank you. This will be very helpful. And I think what we're going to do is, this is supposed to go into effect in January of 2023. And I think we're going to say to people, if anybody wants to go ahead and renew at the lower rate between now and January 2023, you can do that. Even if it means that it's, even if it's not time to renew, you can go ahead and do that and save yourself a little bit of money, or you can just wait and give a little bit more money to the club for all the things that we're trying and wanting to do. So, okay, thank you. The other thing to vote on is the purchase of eclipse glasses. This is the EC has been working on our plans. I'm on a couple of task force, and one for Austin and one for the Hill Country, to figure out exactly what's happening with both the annular and the total eclipse. And one thing that we would like to do would be to buy a lot of eclipse glasses. We need to, if we're going to do it, we need to go ahead and do it, because we don't want to wait till the last minute, because they might not be available. We had recently a very generous donation from Richard Hendricks and Amber Lemon, and we would like to spend part of that on eclipse glasses. And as I wrote in my article in the newsletter, if you had a chance to read it, we would sell some of these to make a little bit of money, but also we're having, depending on the situation, we might be giving some away. If we're having some educational activities and we feel like we want to give some away and not try to make money on those, then we would do that. So the question is, we have to spend $1,500 on eclipse glasses. Any questions or comments? All right, Terry, you want to take a vote in the room?
Okay, the proposal is for us to spend $1,500 on eclipse glasses to be used in supporting the eclipse coming up in 2024. All in favor, raise your hand. 10.
Okay. And then on Zoom, go to reaction and raise your hand. Okay. Yeah, I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay. You can lower your hands in Zoom. Are there any objections in Zoom?
Hi, this is Courtney. I'm just wondering, are we going to do an event? Like, I would maybe rather see like maybe 1,000 for glasses and 500 to maybe do some kind of event for the eclipse, because it's very special. I think it's coming the viewing is like right over Austin. So maybe to do a little party or a little viewing and have a festivity or have music, I don't know, just make something of it. I mean, would it be smarter to have glasses and other expenditure?
Well, I can tell you, Courtney, yeah, that we are coming up with various plans. We are, many of us hope to be at Pedernales Falls. They're having a star party the night before the eclipse, which we've been asked to help with. And then that may mean that some of us can stay at the park on the Sunday night into Monday, so we don't have to get out there on Monday, the day of the eclipse. We may have we probably will have some of our members out at Bad Wolf Ranch. The other thing is we may also be helping out at Inks Lake, which is has an even better, a longer time of totality than Pedernales Falls, but they don't seem to have gotten their act together quite as quickly as Pedernales Falls. So we will be doing activities, and I think there's other money that can be that's available for those. For example, this 1,500 is not 1,500 is half of the donation that we received. So we still have additional money, and this is money that was, as I said, they generously Richard and Amber gave us, and we weren't really expecting, and this is what we felt that we would like to put it into.
Courtney, I expect we'll be having additional votes for additional funds as our plans solidify. We want to do the glasses because it helps get them early, and we know we're going to use glasses regardless of what kind of other activities we do. We'll be able to make a little bit of money off of glasses, and that's basically why we're voting on that one right now.
Yeah. And I have to correct myself. I'm saying Amber, it's Angie Lemon. So, all right. Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, how many glasses do we get for $1,500 approximately?
We will get as many as we can get. In buying them in large quantities like that, they can be as cheap as 40 cents a piece. So now I will say that my thinking is we're not going to do something just for the total eclipse, the annular eclipse, although we don't have the annular view here in Austin. The sun will be about 93% covered. So I think we do need to do an event for that, and that we'll need glasses for that also. So we're really talking about two different events that we want the glasses for. And again, we'll get as many as we can in that kind of quantity. We can get a pretty good deal.
I voted for the glasses, and now I'm hoping that it's clear that day.
Oh, well, don't we all?
Yeah, let's vote on that one.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't think that's in our decision-making power. So, yeah. All right. So I guess did we take a count in the room, Terry? Was there anybody opposed?
Unanimous in the room here was 10 votes.
Okay. And none against. So, okay, we have approved that. Thank you. All right, let's see. Okay, somebody's saying they will buy glasses for friends. Yay, Jeff. Thank you. Thank you. The only thing left on my agenda was to actually mention something that Jamie has already mentioned, which is that next month's meeting is the holiday party, and at the house of a member, and we will be sending out more details on that as we get closer. But it's the usual second Friday in December. We have gone to the Austin Gem and Mineral Society the last couple of years, but that facility wasn't available to us for this year, and so one of our members has agreed to host us, and it should be fun. So you will hear more about that. Is there anything else that anybody has we need to discuss? Okay, Jamie, do you want to introduce Robert? Do you have anything, have a bio or anything? So,
well, just a few words. My voice holds out. I know you guys, actually, many of you, Terry and such, know him better than I do. But I first met Robert just a few months back when we were at the U-Bar-U Star Party. Oops, let Joseph in. There we go. And because of the scheduling was weird, or they had the information listed incorrectly. So Dawn and I and a couple other folks were out hiking when, or at least I was out with some folks hiking when Robert did his presentation, and I was so bummed out that I missed it. And then, as luck has it, we got to spend a lot of time afterwards, in the ensuing day or so, after he spoke. So, having dinner together and just kind of getting to know him. So that was lovely. And that was when, while I confess it was Dawn's idea, she was just like elbowing me, ask him to come speak. So that was wonderful, and he readily accepted, and we were so grateful. And in the ensuing time, I've done a little reading about him, and of the many amazing things he's done. Lots of astrophotography before other folks were involved in astrophotography. But here's a fun fact: he and his wife both have an asteroid named after them. Each one each. So, I mean, it doesn't really get that much cooler than that. So I'm honored to see Robert again and to introduce him. And thank you so much for joining us.
Okay, I'm going to set this to record now.
You're able to.
Okay, then let me see what I got here. Okay. Hopefully you're seeing my title slide, and just as a test, I'm going to advance it once, and it does not advance. Okay, let's do this again. We had this problem just a few minutes ago.
Is it on a full screen?
Oops. Oh, no, I went to my rear slide for some reason, but it won't advance to my first slide. And I think I've accidentally started, wait a minute, I started a program by mistake. Let me kill that. Okay. How the hell do I get, oh, okay, here. Screen sharing has stopped. Well, no, okay. Now let's go back to screen share.
You need to open the image again. Go stop share again.
Stop share. Okay.
Go into that folder. Open that slide. And use the little arrow up here. I think once you advance it, then your keyboard will work.
Yep, it's working now, but are we screen sharing?
No, so then go back into Zoom right there.
Wrong Zoom.
Yeah, that one.
And go to screen share. Go to that one. And then go back to my full screen. Hold on. It won't do anything. Okay, we had this running a while ago. We're smarter than this.
There we go.
Okay. There, finally. All righty. Now, back up to my title slide. Were you able to see the slides change just then, back and forth?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, very good. Well, we finally got number one on the runway, and we're running here. I'm kind of flattered to have been invited to speak to so many different organizations. COVID ended, and all of a sudden, I get to speak to 6 different groups within 30 days. Started off with El Dorado, and it'll end up at the end of the month with another Zoom meeting to an outfit called Utah Astronomy Women, an all-women's astronomy club up in Utah. I've spoken to them before. They're a real hoot. But in the meantime, I speak to Dallas, Houston, here in Austin, El Dorado Star Party. So it's been a very interesting time. Originally, I was going to speak about Postcards from the Moon, my latest series of lunar images, popularizing lunar understanding of the moon, observing the moon, getting people more interested in the moon as an alternate to not doing astronomy, because here we are in the middle of town, or it's a bright full moon, can't go out and do deep sky, but the moon is just as much of a viable target as anything else. It was the thing back when I was a kid, back when the Apollo program was in full blast. So in the meantime, I've also been having an awful lot of fun doing serious deep sky astrophotography from the middle of San Antonio and doing better work from my backyard in Northeast San Antonio. I live well within Loop 410. I live in the city of Terrell Hills, right next to Alamo Heights in San Antonio, just a couple of blocks from Alamo Heights High School, if you're familiar with that location. And doing better astrophotography from there than I used to be able to do at the Texas Star Party. So I'm going to actually combine two different presentations I've done to the Astronomy on Tap bunch down there in San Antonio, urban deep sky colors and postcards from the moon. I'm not going to concentrate on the astrophotography too much because there are fewer astrophotography people here than there are potential lunar observers. But I do want to emphasize that deep sky astrophotography is very doable very easily from in the city now. Very bright urban skies where you can just barely see the summer triangle is no longer an impediment to doing deep sky astrophotography. I call this a victory for astronomy where technology defeats light pollution. Now, granted, you can't visually observe these targets, but you can photograph them. And like I said, all the pictures I'm going to be showing here of the deep sky objects were taken from Terrell Hills in San Antonio using a ZWO ASI 294 MC Pro camera. Very popular cool deep sky camera nowadays, using a Radian Filters Triad Ultra quad band filter. This is Radian Filters is OPT's house brand, but the filter was developed in the United States. It is produced in the United States. It's a domestic filter, and it just plain works. I'm not meaning this to be a commercial for OPT. I'm just saying, look, we have finally arrived. This technology does work. I use a Celestron 14 HyperStar, which all you astrophotographers know that the HyperStar lens replaces the normal secondary on a Schmidt cast screen telescope. And in this case, it converts a 14-inch f11 telescope into a 14-inch f2 astrograph, working about 675 millimeters focal length at f2. My normal exposure time, and there is plenty of space in the histogram to go longer, is 4 minutes from the middle of San Antonio at f2. And I'm not overexposing the vast sky background. Often I am overexposing the target. So this is my rig sitting on top of my garage back home. My observatory is on top of the garage to get up above all the trees. Celestron 14, ASI 294. Pranvera Hysini, I'm sure you all know who she is, admiring my setup. And that's how it looks on top of the garage. It's a roll-off building. The doors open up and the whole building rolls away to expose the telescope. Nice hot summer day. So of course I've got the fan blowing on it to let it cool off a little bit. And a very typical installation, C14 on a CGXL mount. The pier goes down through the roof of the garage and rests on a steel platform that is in the rear of the garage, just sitting on the floor with a massive, perhaps 150 or 1,500 to 2,000 pounds. It doesn't move.
Can you speak up a little bit? Hard to hear you.
Okay, yeah, that's right. There is no PA in here. Okay, I'll try to yell louder. I have a very weak voice to begin with, so I apologize. The interior of the observatory, when it's open, a little fold-up desk for my desktop, for my laptop, which essentially acts as a relay. I actually control the telescope from inside the house. And how many observatories have a spare telescope over in the corner? My C11 over there, which I swap out for lunar work. Anyway, this is the beast in battle form, getting ready for deep sky astrophotography from inside the middle of San Antonio, a place where you just don't think of doing astronomy. The key for this, of course, is the Radian Triad Ultra filter, quad band filter. They originally came out with a quad band or a tri-band filter, then they improved it to a quad band filter, and lately they've improved it even yet more to a what they call the F3 filter, which works better at shorter focal lengths, less spectral roll-off, where the H alpha bandpass would creep away from the 3 nanometer bandpass of the filter. So now the H alpha filter is more centered on the bandpass at short focal lengths.
Quick question. Would that filter be good for visual observing as well? Or
No,
just for astrophotography?
one more slide will show that. Anyway, the quad band filter, they publish these usual spectral band passes. And in this case, I'm going to say this, they're not lying. It really does only pass those very narrow wavelengths, blocks everything else. Okay, where was it? Oh, that's the one I was talking about. It's visually opaque. It presents a mirror-like surface when you like to look through it. I mean, you use this thing as a shaving mirror, but you can't see through it at all. But the camera will see those very narrow band passes, the sulfur, hydrogen beta, oxygen 2, hydrogen alpha, and it does an extremely good job with that. Now, focusing, I haven't quite mastered Nina yet, which has autofocus. So I'm still using a Batonov mask, but I'll get around to fully automating the focus pretty soon. This is the system that before I had the observatory finished, it was on this roll around platform where I rolled it out of the garage. As an example of how good this filter is, while the telescope is sitting there running, doing a deep sky exposure, my wife drove up the driveway. She's got a Buick SUV with those headlights that are brighter than whatever. I have to mind my words in public, but they're extremely bright. So I thought, okay, I've lost that subframe. When I processed the images, looked through the whole series, I could not tell which picture got blasted by her headlights. That's how good this filter is. Anyway, focusing it with a Batonov mask, and you photographers know how that works. Center the little center bar of the X and you're in focus. So getting down to brass tacks, how good does this work from the middle of San Antonio, which is probably no worse than much of Austin. The double cluster in Perseus, it works wonderfully on clusters. Let's go the right way. M7 and down in the tail end of Scorpius. Notice a little dark nebula underneath it. We call it the running dog nebula. M13, anytime you get that little propeller asterism shadow overlaying M13, you got a good picture going. M35 with this little companion cluster. M46 and 47 with the planetary nebula embedded in it. Planetary nebula work very well with this filter. I can zero in on a 14th magnitude planetary, and it's shining like a headlight just on my framing exposures of 2 seconds. The planetary nebulas hit the bandpass on this filter perfect. Crab nebula, looking real good. It doesn't work as good with galaxies, but if you give it enough exposure, it works. And since I'm working from home, I don't need to worry about lugging it out in the middle of nowhere, setting it up, having to bring it all back home. So I can go ahead and expose all night long, or not all night long, but 3-4 hours on a target, as long as the clouds don't get me. M81, M82, 101. The sombrero turns out real good, although it's a little small because the short focal length, but I like how it looks. Triangulum, probably could process that one a little bit better. Andromeda from the backyard looks as good as everybody else's out the Texas Star Party. Emission nebula, really ring in on this thing. The flame, again, one of the ones I could probably process better now that I go back to it. Orion nebula, almost overexposed. It looks, Orion in these long exposures almost looks like a clam, open clam. You don't normally see that effect. All the surrounding nebulosity just shines right through, even though we're working from the middle of San Antonio. The rosette, we saw in our introduction, as good as you're going to get anywhere. Monkey Head Nebula up in the northern part of Orion. And the Pac-Man Nebula, NGC 281. one of those nebulas that I named back in the 1980s, and the name stuck. The Bubble Nebula, obviously I didn't name that one, M52. California. Tadpoles Nebula, IC 410 up in Auriga. Jellyfish, IC 443 up in Gemini. Lagoon Nebula, almost overexposed from the middle of town. And a very nice portrait of M20 and its little companion cluster up there, M21. The Eagle Nebula, shot this one just this past couple of months. The Swan Nebula. And this I shot last week, Butterfly Nebula, IC 1318 up in Cygnus. And the Pelican, also part of that nebula complex up in the northern part of Cygnus. Down below the Pelican, there's this IC 5068 nebula complex that nobody's given it a name, but since the Pelican is just above it, I call it the Pelican's Nest. Oops. And the Veil Nebula, the three components of it. One part of it looks more like a feather to me, so I call it the Feather Nebula. Pickering's Triangle has always had that name, so I'm not going to tread on that. We'll leave it be. And then, of course, the other side of the veil. To me, it looks like a good old-fashioned Gulf shrimp, seafood. So I call it the Shrimp Nebula. And the Elephant Truck, embedded in IC 1396. Crescent Nebula, the Cocoon. All kinds of goodies up there in Cygnus, the Mexico portion of the North American Nebula. North America is too big to fit into the field of view of my HyperStar. So in a nutshell, the beauty of the night sky is infinite. We just need to know how to look at it. And with these filters we have nowadays, I've been promoting the OPT triad filter, but other filter manufacturers are going to come along and recreate that as well. And I'm sure prices will start coming down. The triad filter and its 2-inch triad F3
Yeah,
filter.
he hadn't started the presentation, I don't think.
Hello?
Oh, I apologize.
The 2-inch triad filter is pricey. It's over $1,000. But in the time that I've been using it, it has saved me money for the amount of pictures I've been able to take without having to travel 200-mile round trip each time and drag a 300-pound astrophotography rig with me. It has saved a tremendous amount of money. I get to do astrophotography any clear night that I don't have other obligations. So it's definitely worth the money, something for astrophotographers to consider. So getting back to the main topic that I was supposed to talk about here tonight, postcards from the moon, exploring and understanding our natural satellite. Now, for a number of years, I've been trying to promote the moon as a observational target. Deep sky observers tend to avoid the moon. It's that big bright light that gets in the way of all the goodies that we can see in deep space. But it is also an alternate target. It's a target that doesn't care about light pollution. You can observe the moon from home. You can observe the moon in the daytime if you want. Once you understand how the moon is put together, how it came into being, how its features were formed, become friends of the moon, it becomes a much more viable target. It's always good to know, to understand what you're looking at. So tonight we're going to explore basically the
I lost the sound.
Yeah, Robert is muted. Yeah, we can't hear Robert.
okay.
Out of your presentation
I
back
am
into Zoom or something.
No, that's the very beginning when we're well into the presentation now. Go back to that one. And let's bring it up. And let me just pick in. There it's going. It's working. Yay. Stop. Don't touch it. It's working. As long as we're screen sharing.
I don't think you're showing your screen right now.
Uh-oh. Yeah.
Okay, so go back
Back
to
to Zoom.
Zoom.
And there's that one. Okay, folks, are we back on the air? Okay. This is not advancing. That one trick, and then it works after that.
Yeah, I think once you do the arrows, then it starts working. Then you try your space bar and backspace.
There we go. Okay. Well, I'm not going to try to full screen it or anything. Things are getting touchy here. So continuing on, we're going to explore the creation of the face of the moon, the lunar maria, the mysteries of the Terminator. We're going to take voyages to landmark craters, Plato, Tycho, and Copernicus, as well as Straight Wall. These are features that catch both novice and experienced lunar observers' attention, and they become favorites pretty much for life. We'll explore volcanic features, something called ghost craters, floor fractured craters, crater rays, odd-shaped craters are not all round, valleys and mountains on the moon, scarps or cliffs, and take a look at the ever-changing moon. Now, waxing crescent moon is the first phase that we see right, shortly after sunset in the west as the phases of the moon begin to cycle through. I call this the Cheshire Cat moon. Remember back in the tales of Alice in Wonderland, the Cheshire Cat just faded away, disappeared until only his smile was left. Well, that's what the crescent moon reminds me of. And Mare Crisium, Sea of Crises, is one of the very first of the lunar seas we see during this phase. Kind of looks like an unwinking eye staring at the Earth. And the craters Langrenus and Batavius are the only large craters visible during this phase. And these are big enough that you can actually see these craters with a good pair of binoculars. Now, getting into the quarter moon, we begin to pick up more of the lunar seas. We get Crisium, joined by Fecunditatis, Mare Nectaris, Tranquillitatis, Serenitatis. And of course, Serenitatis and Tranquillitatis combined are what form the man in the moon's right eye when we see the caricature of the man in the moon. Now we follow the terminator, or the late dark side of the moon, or edge of the moon, where the sunrise or sunset is, because this is where we see the greatest amount of detail. Shadows reveal the surface feature relief. Getting up into the waxing gibbous moon, we're now seeing more of the lunar maria. Imbrium joins the bunch. So we've got Mare Nubium, Humorum, Cognitum, and Insularum are newcomers. They were named during the space age, during our lifetime. And of course, now we can see the landmarks that catches everybody's attention. The dark floored crater Plato, Copernicus with its huge splash of rays, Tycho with its own almost hemisphere-wide splash of rays. The full moon is where we begin to have an understanding of how the face of the moon came together. Two forces created the face of the moon: asteroid impacts and the subsequent volcanic modification of these impact features. The large round features, dark features we see are actually giant impact basins that later filled in with lava flows. And we now see those as the face of the man of the moon. Now, these basins were created by asteroid impacts between 3.8 and 3.9 billion years ago. This was the Nectarian epoch, fierce asteroid bombardment. And bear in mind, the moon got beat up pretty good, but so did the Earth. The Earth looked very similar to the moon back then, a heavily cratered wasteland. But planet Mercury, Venus, Mars, the moon, all got shellacked by this infall of asteroids. Only the Earth has healed its wounds because of our atmosphere and our oceans and our volcanic activity, plate tectonics. It renews the surface and essentially erases all of these impact scars from billions of years ago. But that impact record is still visible on the moon today. As I mentioned, Maria were formed by lava eruptions that flooded these impact basins between 3 and 3.8 billion years ago. So we have to understand that these Maria that we see, the dark spots that form the face of the man on the moon, the Maria and the basins they lie in are not the same thing. They are two different features. One was created by an asteroid impact. The other was created by subsequent volcanic action. Now, following around some of these Maria, Crisium to begin with, we see that they follow the same basic theme, a circular impact basin. In this case, Crisium fills its basin all the way up to the rim with basalt, creates a very smooth floor. The Pyrenees Mountains form the eastern side. We see the wrinkle ridges, Dorso Tetyaev, Dorso Harker on the east side. On the west side, Dorsum Opal, Dorsum Termier. These wrinkle ridges are formed when the lava fill in a basin slumps toward the middle of the basin. The mass and weight of it depresses the middle of the basin, and the basalt flows slump toward the middle and create these wrinkle ridges. In the case of Mare Crisium, the Mare floor is fairly blank except for the small craters Swift, Pierce, and Picard. Now getting over to the other side, or southern side of the moon, we've got Mare Nectaris, and it follows the same theme, a circular impact basin filled with basalts, except the action was a little heavier down here. We got Theophilus crater, Cyrillus crater, Katharina crater along the western rim. Oops, I think we just went to full screen. I hope everything is still working. And then down at the south, Fracastorius crater. Keep Fracastorius in mind. It's going to appear again pretty soon, but it look entirely different. So bear that one in mind. Heading over to the western hemisphere, Mare Imbrium is the largest of the Maria that we see with the eye from the Earth, but in reality, it's only the second largest. Another sea, Oceanus Procellarum, is actually larger, but its slant view or foreshortened view of it makes it less apparent. But on Imbrium, the sea forms the man on the moon's left eye, and it hosts Plato crater, Cassini crater, very distinctive because of the double impact within its walls gives it that snake eye appearance, and Archimedes crater. You notice these two, Plato and Archimedes, unusual. They don't look like a normal crater. They're not bowl-shaped. They've been paved over. They're flat. In this case, the impact that created these craters fractured the lunar crust underneath and allowed lava flows to come up through the floor of the crater. This lava fill within these craters didn't flow over the rim. They came up from underneath and pushed up the floor and paved it from lava flows from underneath. In the case of Plato, the floor is something like 600 meters higher than the surrounding Maria. So the volcanic pressures that pushed up that lava were rather strong. Down in the southwestern corner, quadrant of the moon, we've got Mare Humorum, the sea of humidity, they call it. Now this one's punctuated by the floor fractured crater Gassendi, which reminds me of grandma's oatmeal cookies right out of the oven, and Doppelmayr down in the south. Very distinctive craters. Not all of the Maria completely filled up with basalts. Mare Austral down in the southeast is close to the far side of the moon where the crust is thicker, and the thicker crust restricted lava flows. So the basin that forms Austral didn't completely flood with lava. It only filled in low-lying craters. So Mare Austral has got a very blotchy appearance, just a collection of lava-filled craters. I mentioned the largest of the Mare, Oceanus Procellarum. It's the only lunar sea that is called an ocean. And it's the largest of the Mare, but it's on the far western limb of the moon. So our foreshortened view of it diminishes to the point where it really doesn't even contribute to the caricature of the man in the moon. But it does host Aristarchus crater, Copernicus crater, Kepler crater, and their combined crater ray systems forms a blotch on the moon that you can see with the naked eye during moonrise. The Oriental Basin on the extreme western limb of the moon. Oriental or the Eastern Sea, you'd think the western limb is an odd place to put it, but before 1960, the east and west limbs of the moon the designations were reversed. Only when we began SpaceX explorations and realized we're going to be sending astronauts to the moon were the map on the moon oriented so that west is on the left, north is on the top, like a terrestrial map. Prior to that, all lunar maps were inverted with north on the bottom, kind of the way that you would see it in a refracting telescope. That was very common prior to the space age. Anyway, Oriental hugs the western limb, and it is so foreshortened on the limb of the moon that you can see the rim of the basin on either side of it. This picture has been turned sideways so it fits onto the screen better, but Oriental is actually oriented vertically along the western limb of the moon. But you can see the flat floor of the basin filled up with lava. You can see the rim of the mountainous rim of the basin rim, which is a basin is basically a giant crater. A lunar basin is any crater larger than 300 kilometers. If it's less than 300 kilometers, it's a crater. Bigger than 300 kilometers, it's a basin. And here we can see the rim of that giant crater on either side of Oriental. Oops, I guess I should have kept up with my slides. In the foreground, a very bright rayed crater Burgess. Bear in mind that crater rays will fade after about 1 billion years. So any crater on the moon that has a very bright ray system is fairly new within the past 1 billion years. Another Plato wannabe, the basalt-filled crater Kruger. And remember I said keep an eye on Fracastorius, cruising along the Terminator, exploring the mysteries of the Terminator. Sometimes the deep shadows on the moon alter the appearance of craters to the point where you don't even recognize them. But we saw Fracastorius earlier, looked very much like an ordinary crater on the southern shore of Mare Nectaris. And here we can't even recognize it. And the same for Piccolomini crater, a very well-known crater, but buried in shadow like that, it's just complete mystery. Oops, other way. The two lunar strongmen, Atlas and Hercules, two very ordinary craters, but in the shadow of the Terminator, they take on a whole different personality. On the Southern Highlands, we've got some craters that are fairly substantial in size, but there are so many, they're lost amongst themselves. And very few of us have heard of Batiscus, Homel, Mutus. These are not exactly crater names that roll off the tongue, like Plato or Copernicus or Tycho. The western shore of Mare Nectaris, we've got some territory showing our craters named after some significant people. Gutenberg, the inventor or the perfecter of the movable movable type printing press. Glauclinius, we really don't know that much about him. He's a German doctor back in the 15th century, but you certainly have heard of Magelhanes, better known as the explorer Magellan, circumnavigated the globe, and Christophe Colomb, the Italian, who under the King of Spain, Queen of Spain, dispatched him to discover the New World. Some craters hide in plain sight. And if this is sharing the way I think it is, it's hiding behind Joyce. Anyway, Janssen crater, so shallow, so wide that it virtually disappears at high sun. But when the lunar terminator is sweeping across it, we have these relief enhancing shadows. We see it for what it is, 200 kilometers in diameter, but only a couple of kilometers deep. So you need these low shadows to see it. Most people spot Fabricius crater, a 70-kilometer crater in its own right, inside Janssen before they even recognize Janssen. And they'll also spot Rima Janssen, that curved rill that arcs through the floor of Janssen. We've visited these people before, 3 craters that arced around northwestern Mare Nectaris. In this case, it's a study of the age of craters and how one will affect another. In this particular case, all of these, Theophilus, Cyrus, and Katharina, they're very similar in age. They're over 3 billion years old. But Theophilus on top looks much younger than Cyrus or Katharina. What happened is Katharina formed first, and then Cyrus formed, and the seismic shaking, the massive earthquake from the asteroid impact, and the shower of ejecta that flew out of that crater ruined Katharina. And then here comes Theophilus later, partially overlays the rim of Cyrus, and its ejecta and seismic shaking ruins Katharina and ruins Cyrus and further ruins Katharina. So we observe how one crater affects another, how one crater overlays another, whether it has rays. We can use these clues to deduce the age and the order in which the features on the moon were created. Doing a little tourist shots here, going through the very popular crater Plato. Just its appearance, this back in the 16th century, it was called the Great Black Lake, back when they thought the dark spots on the moon were bodies of water. But we now know, of course, that it's just basalt fields. But Plato just does not look like an ordinary crater. Lava fill gives it a totally different personality, and it becomes very much of a favorite with lunar observers. It lies on the northern shore of Mare Imbrium, man of the moon's left eye, and kind of sandwiched between Imbrium and Mare Frigoris, which is the long, narrow lunar sea that kind of forms the eyebrows above the man in the moon's eyes. And of course, Cassini crater down south. And look at W Bond over here. I'll flash it so that you see W Bond. It looks almost square. Not all craters are round. That almost looks like the earthen embankments of a military fortification. This portion of the moon preserves impacts from almost 4 billion years ago. And the subsequent impacts near W Bond modified the crater shape and gave it a very square appearance. Getting closer to Plato, you notice 4 little craterlets on the floor of Plato. If you're able to pick those up in your telescope, you've got some really good seeing going on that night. The Alps Mountains arc off to the east of Plato. The Alpine Valley cuts through the Alps. Little Pico and Python mountain peaks protruding through Mare Imbrium. They also become sentimental favorites of lunar observers. And down at the bottom, whoops, if I keep going, I'll flash it so that you see it. Notice Thor's hammer? Yeah, we can call Agent Coulson and let him know we found it. He doesn't need to look anymore. Mjolnir is on the moon. It's actually 2 intersecting small mountain rims, but with the shadows playing on it, it looks exactly like Thor's hammer. And by the way, I did name that. It's one of my creations. Closer still to Plato, we now see the volcanic rills that extend away from it. The Alpine Valley we now see there's a volcanic rill running through the middle of it. Linear features on the moon we can see when they are much smaller than just craterlets. That rill running through the Alpine Valley here. It's only about a half a mile wide. Features on the moon that small are normally invisible, but it works exactly like the same way as seeing a telephone wire off in the distance. That telephone wire is about that thick. And there's no way you're going to see something that thick if it were a little round ball way off 100-yard away, but you can clearly see that the arc of that telephone wire because it's a linear object, not just a tiny spot. And the same with these lunar rills. They can be smaller than theoretically possible to see with the human eye if it was just a finite spot. But since it's a linear object, they show up quite well. Zeroing in on Tycho crater, the one in the very center, the one that's obviously much fresher than all the old guys around it. Tycho crater is perhaps 40 times younger than the surrounding territory. It's believed by analysis of Apollo samples that Tycho is only 108 million years old. I have a little trouble believing that exact figure, but I don't have the science to dispute it. But I will readily admit Tycho is at least 250,000 years old. And if they want to say it's 1.8, I don't have the PhD to argue with them. But like I said, I'm having a tough time accepting such a finite definition. But I will admit Tycho is the youngest large crater on the moon. And I would be very surprised if it was actually more than a quarter billion years old. Oh, well, there it is. I've been talking about it. The old guys around it, like Longomontanus, Clavius. These craters date back to Nectarian or pre-Nectarian epoch times 4 billion years ago. And here comes Tycho, boom, on top of them. Its formation more than likely startled quite a few T-Rex here on the Earth, the blast and the flash. It was probably quite spectacular. And getting in closer to Tycho, now we're seeing a low sun elevation angle where the relief is showing the thousands created by the ejecta thrown out from the crater. What goes up must come down unless it exceeds the lunar escape velocity. So if it did not exceed 2.6 kilometers per second, it's going to come back down, and it made the rain of debris coming back created these thousands of secondary craters just scattered all around Tycho. And you can see more of them here, and some of them even appear to line up in streams, linear chains. And these follow the same pattern as the ray structure from Tycho that extends almost halfway around the face of the moon. Copernicus crater, another one with a magnificent ray structure. This image again turns sideways so it'll fit onto the screen. North is actually to the left. Sunrise at Copernicus is something you really need to enjoy. Mare Imbrium to the north to set the stage. Eratosthenes crater up at the upper left. The Carpathian Mountains separating the territory to the north, Imbrium from Mare Insularum below. Secondary craters from Copernicus scattered out in chains and ropey chains in all directions. Mare Insularum to the south. And here we see why it is called Mare Insularum, the Sea of Islands. The huge number of hills and mountain peaks look very much like islands in the sea. And Reinhold crater to the south to kind of give a little bit of artistic balance to the picture. And straight wall, one of the non-crater features on the moon that it becomes a very strong sentimental favorite. This is a feature that geologists called a graben. It's an area along a fault line where land on one side slumps down and creates a cliff or a slope. In the case of straight wall, it's over 100 kilometers long. When the sun is rising in the east, it casts a black shadow. When the sun is setting in the west, it illuminates the face of the slope and creates a white line feature. Now, back in the days when the moon was a very popular observing target, we didn't have the resolution to see. I'm jumping ahead of myself. But I guess I didn't ladle. I would do this the hard way. Hope my cursor is working. But see this Rima Burt here, this volcanic rill. We couldn't even see that in the telescope. It escaped us completely. But now with modern photographic techniques, any amateur astronomer can photograph this feature that was essentially invisible to us 20, 30 years ago. Anyway, the whole territory around the straight wall, our Zatchel crater to the north establishes the territory. We've got, we're on the eastern shore of Mare Nubium, right by the crater Thabit. But notice that straight wall itself is inside a much larger circular feature defined by this horseshoe bay here, this half crater rim that extends out to these wrinkle ridges that where the submerged crater rim has been flooded by the Mare Nubium lavas. We still see the gross curved shape of the buried crater rim in these wrinkle ridges. There is no official name for this giant circular feature that surrounds straight wall. So we unofficially call it ancient Thabit after the larger Thabit crater that overlies the horseshoe, the rim of the horseshoe bay. Now, I said at sunset, the cliff face or the slope, it's not really a cliff. Now, back in the 40s and 50s, a very popular illustration for straight wall was the Chesley Bonestell art rendering of straight wall, where he envisioned it almost as a straight sheer cliff. Straight wall is not a cliff. It's more like a 30-degree slope. I say that a spirited future astronaut could actually traverse that on foot if they were careful. You know, go down the slope. It's about 300 meters high. It spans about 800 meters spread out. But the point of this picture is here sunset is illuminating the cliff face or the slope face face on, making it a white line feature. But imagine if you're standing up at the top of straight wall, looking down on Mare Nubium as the sun is setting. On Earth, we look at sunset, sun goes down in about 2 minutes. The Earth is rotating every 24 hours. Bear in mind, the moon only rotates once a month. Sunset on the moon takes 1 hour. So just standing there watching this spectacular sun go down with this lunar landscape in front of you down at the base of the cliff, you know, imagination can run pretty wild with that. It's got to be spectacular. Volcanic features on the moon. Fortunately, right square in the middle of the moon, with 0 longitude, 0 latitude. We've got a raft of them. We've got Rima Triesnecker, Rima Hyginus, and the 9-kilometer crater right in the middle of the gull ring shape of Rima Hyginus. It's the largest non-impact crater on the moon. It's actually a volcanic collapse pit. The heart of the moon, this dark mountainous region, it's been covered with pyroclastic deposits, dark ash deposits from volcanic eruptions over 1 million years ago. It appears like a heart shape. So I call it the heart of the moon. And then Rima Aridaeus, another graben, the collapsed land between 2 parallel faults. It almost looks like an interstate highway excavation. In this view, we get both a feature called the floor fractured crater and more volcanic activity in the crater that's filled up with basalt. Here we've got Hercules and Atlas, the lunar strongmen. Atlas, its floor looks radically different than Hercules. In this case, Atlas is much older. Its floor has been volcanically uplifted by volcanic pressures below, pushed the floor up, created the cracks and crevices in it. And this is a feature we call a floor fractured crater. Endymion, kind of a Plato wannabe, similar in size to Plato, completely filled with basalt. And you notice the dusky streaks of ray material splashed across it. You can see the bird foot pattern, the Y-shaped pattern of the white ray material. Those V's in the bird's foot pattern point back to the crater that that material came from. And on the horizon, we see Mare Humboldtianum, another one of these lunar seas that hugs the limb, but this one doesn't stay as hidden as previous Mare Orientale because of the vibration of the moon, the ability of the moon to kind of rock and nod around because of the elliptical shape of its orbit. Another view shows Endymion again to set the scene, and there is Mare Humboldtianum, but we can see the entire Mare this time. It's tipped toward us. And this illustrates that we don't just see half of the moon from the Earth. Because of this periodic rocking and nodding caused by the libration, we can actually see 59% of the moon's surface from the Earth eventually. It takes years for all of it to eventually show up. But if you're patient and follow the libration angles, you can peek around the rim of the moon in certain directions at certain times of the month. And in this case, we see this little bump on the horizon. This is the rim of the far side crater Compton. Compton is at 110 degrees longitude, well beyond the 90-degree normal half of the moon. More volcanic features on the moon. Setting the scene, this is Kepler crater on the on the Oceanus Procellarum. We've got the Aristarchus Plateau up at the top. Volcanic feature built up by millions of years of volcanic eruption, and the Marias Hills, a collection of dozens of individual little pancake volcanoes, each one a tiny volcanic feature. Ghost craters. Here we're on the western shore of Mare Tranquillitatis, and we see the strange circular feature in the basalt. This is the ghost crater Lamont, a pre-existing crater that was on the floor of the Tranquillitatis basin before the lava flows buried it. And now all we see is the wrinkle ridges created by the rim of the crater as it pushed up the basalt. And to set the stage, we've got the Apollo 11 landing site here. So, again, another floor fractured crater, Petavius, with Rima Petavius extending from the central peak out to the western rim. Posidonius on Mare Serenitatis, another well-known floor fractured crater where volcanic pressures from below modified the floor of the crater. Le Monnier crater, Horseshoe Bay crater, uninspiring in its own right, but until the Chinese landed a rover on the moon a couple of years ago, that was the site of the last human exploration on the moon, where the Russians landed the robotic Lunar Hod 2 rover back in 1973. On the Serpentine Ridge, another one of the very famous, well-known wrinkle ridges. I mentioned crater rays, if I keep going in the right direction. They're the material blasted out from the crater that showers out across the face of the moon. And generally, this crater rays are visible on very young craters. By the time a crater is 1 billion years old, space weathering, micrometeorite erosion, solar radiation have made these rays fade, and we don't see them anymore. But in this case, Stevenius A and Phaneris A, very bright. These are very young. They're not big, but they're so bright that we call them the headlights when we look at them in a telescope. Another odd form of crater ray is called the butterfly ray. And this occurs when there's a very oblique impact on the moon. Here we've got Mare Crisium on one side, Mare Tranquillitatis on the other side. and Proclus crater in the middle, but the rays do not spread out in all directions like you would expect. In this case, the impactor arrived from the southwest, at a very low inclination and less than 5 degrees. And oblique impacts like this, there's a zone of avoidance where none of the ejecta goes back in the direction of the impactor. So we end up with these butterfly ray patterns. And not all craters are round. Here we've got Rheta E, kind of keyhole shaped. Valleys on the moon. The Rheta Valley, about 600 kilometers long. And notice it is not necessarily a straight feature. Kind of the dog leg in the middle is Mallet Crater. The Rheta Valley is named after the crater Rheta up at its northern rim, northern end. But I contend these are two independent features, and that the bottom half of it should really be called the Mallet Valley. Mountains on the moon are not created like Earth mountains. On Earth, we've got plate tectonics and volcanic activity that create the lunar mountains, push them up from plate tectonics. But all mountains on the moon, mountain chains on the moon, are the rims of impact basins. In this case, the rim of the Imbrium Basin, eastern rim of the Imbrium Basin, form the Alps up near Plato, the Caucasus Mountains to the east of Archimedes, and the Apennine Mountains sweeping down toward Copernicus crater. Scarps on the moon, in this case, the Altai Scarp arcing around southwestern Mare Nectaris is really the rim of the outer Nectarian impact basin ring. It's the only surviving part of it. Elsewhere around the ring, subsequent impacts of volcanic activity has erased its evidence. But here in this particular area, this 2 kilometer high scarp is very visible. And getting close to the end, the moon is not an unchanging feature. We can see a different phase every evening. It gets bigger and bigger until full moon, and then smaller and smaller until new moon again. But people don't realize how quickly things change along the terminator where the sunrise is. This series of pictures was taken in the course of just 2 hours. And here we see the sunrise shadows receding across Ptolemaeus crater. The curvature of the moon, because the moon is so small, only 2,000 kilometers in diameter, is enough that what would be considered the flat floor of Ptolemaeus is actually bulged, where it follows the curve of the shape of the moon, the circumference of the moon. So it's protruding up into the sunlight. And as the sun gets higher and higher over the course of 2 hours, these shadows shrink and recede across the face of the crater. You can see this action along the terminator any night. Oops, should have been chatting away a storm here. Anyway, concluding, the moon is a geologic wonderland. It's accessible from your backyard. You can see it anytime the weather allows or the phase of the moon allows. And once you understand what you're looking at, the moon takes on a whole new personality. So I really urge you, don't ignore the moon because it's getting in the way of the deep sky, but make it an alternate target from home where you can do astronomy. There's much to love on the moon. And I enjoy, I ask you to come join me out on my playground. So well, that concludes my presentation, and I'll be happy to take any questions.
Spectacular. Yay. Awesome.
That woke everybody up.
Yeah, Robert, I don't have any questions, but it was very complete and very rich, very detailed and complete. Thank you very much.
No, thank you. I appreciate that.
I just want to confirm, Robert, these are all photographs that you have taken?
Yeah, well, I took every one of them from my observatory there in the middle of San Antonio. Same place I'm doing all
take you to get take all of those? I mean, that's such a complete tour of the moon.
Yep. I was going to ask the same question. You took all those photos? They're amazing.
Yeah, I've been doing it for well over 10 years. So eventually you keep picking at it, you get a good collection of them.
So these weren't all in like the same instrument setting, same focal length.
No, they're varied. They were taken either with my original Celestron 8 or through a Celestron 11 that Celestron gave me back in 2013, or through a Skywatcher 180 millimeter Maksutov that Skywatcher gave me. There's a theme coming here, or a 20-inch Dobsonian that Skywatcher gave me. I have tried to take pictures of the moon through the 14-inch Celestron that Celestron gave me, but so far the seeing in San Antonio has deteriorated, and it's just not working out like it used to. And to add insult to injury, the house next door was sold, and the new owners are putting a huge addition on the back that's going to put a huge roof with hot shingles real close to my observatory. So things are going downhill for my lunar work. But I have quite a collection of stuff that I've taken over the years. So I've got plenty of material to chat with about the moon.
Well, there's a big push with the dark sky communities or dark sky cities that are trying to get certification. So there's different groups. I'm sure there's one in San Antonio, and perhaps you can, prevail upon the new neighbors to accommodate.
I couldn't quite understand everything you said, but I understood you were talking about some group in San Antonio.
Oh, no, you were talking about your neighbors.
Oh, my neighbors. Yeah, well, I can't stop them from building the house that they're building, but fortunately, unless they flat shine a spotlight on me, I don't think it's light pollution wise anything could be bothering me. But the heat waves from their hot roof will ruin my seeing even worse. So we shall see what happens. My lunar work may be all aimed to the west.
So Robert, you've got an asteroid named after you, not a lunar crater yet?
You have to be dead to have a crater named after you. Well, for a feature to be named on the moon, it has to be the target of some form of study. Therefore, then they will consider naming it, or something very significantly historic. And,
okay, we didn't mean anything personal by that, okay?
I don't plan to have any lunar craters named after me for quite a few more years. But yeah, Chuck Wood is the lunar columnist for Sky and Telescope, is the head of the IAU Lunar Nomenclature Committee, and he's the guy that names the moon now. So if you got suggestions, he's the one to give them to.
Yeah, what are the smallest? I mean, they've used so many names now. They're going for smaller and smaller features. So what level of features are being named these days?
Well, actually, there's features as small as a half a kilometer that are named. These are only in very small clumps of areas. But one I'm particularly intrigued with is on Mars Serenitatis. There is a Robert and Mary crater within walking distance of each other. They were not named after us, but I'm claiming those craters. We've got our own asteroids, so I'm going to claim those lunar craters, but that's not official. There are very small features like that are named after first names, whereas major features are named after last names, Tycho and Copernicus and so forth and so on, or the names of prominent scientists. But these small features and very small clusters where some sort of geologic study was done, particularly since the space age, when we have maps that show that, there are little clusters of these first name craters.
Well, Robert, I noticed that a lot of the photos of the Mare look very much like chert specimens I find around Central Texas. I'm a hopeless rock hound. I just grab everything. And there are some chert and
Hey, Jamie, I think.
sorry, my cat is getting amorous.
Yeah.
Chert and flint and various rocks that have some kind of transparency, and it looks like those mare have transparency similarly, where you can. And I'm sure it's not the same thing, but what is what are the mare? Are they mostly just basalt?
Yeah, they're solidified basalt. They're lava flows that have solidified, but they're not solid rock like you would find in recent flows in Hawaii. They're a loose soil mixture called regolith. It's the surface rock has been churned and crushed and pulverized by millions and millions of years of infall small meteorites, and it's a process that the geologists call gardening, where these incoming meteorites till the soil, break up the salt into almost a dust-like consistency. The Apollo astronauts had a lot of trouble with this. It has about the consistency of baby powder, but it's very abrasive. If it gets into zippers and spacesuit seals, it caused quite a bit of trouble. So that's the physiology or the geology of this stuff is something that we're very interested in order to properly perfect future moon spacesuits.
Robert, we got a question on the chat. Can we see any craters whose bottoms are in perpetual darkness?
On the poles, there are some craters that we can see on the North and South Pole. The moon's axis is only tilted about 1.5 degrees. We can see craters from Earth where the interiors are in perpetual shadow. Back when the name of it escapes me. Well, we sent a spacecraft up to deliberately crash into Sabaeus crater. Gosh, it was probably 8-9 years ago, to look for ice, evidence of ice in the bottom of these things where sunlight never shines. And we can see the rims of those from Earth easily. But because of our look angles, well, we can't see the bottom of those craters, but we know that they're perpetually in shadow. Let's get your question. You've been trying.
I had more suggestion. Can you cool off? Did you ever try to spray water on the roof to cool it down? Because that would be a relatively cheap solution.
Yeah, well, my own roof, I don't have any trouble with. The garage that I'm on, it's fairly light colored shingles and it cools down fairly quickly. What I'm concerned about is if this big building next door has dark shingles on it, retains heat. I don't know who's going to buy the house. I think they might get a little upset if I'm spraying my garden hose on it. But yeah, you have a point. You know, it's something to cool off that surface heat and prevent the heat waves. But I don't know. This is just something I'm going to have to live with.
We have some pictures of the back of the moon. Are some of the features there named the way?
Oh, yeah, you know, the backside of the moon has as many names on it as the front side does now. The lunar orbiter photographs back in the 1960s, mid 60s, the Luna 3 reconnaissance back in 1959. It was very low resolution, but it was enough to establish that, oh my gosh, there are no large mare on the backside of the moon like there are in the front. That really threw everybody for a tiz. And then lunar orbiter mapped the moon down to multiples of meters resolution. And now the lunar reconnaissance orbiter is continuously mapping the moon and even finding on multiple passes over the years, small impacts, fresh impacts on the moon from new craters. So we're mapping it down literally to a 0.5 meter resolution now with ongoing satellite photography. The Indian and Chinese satellites have done this as well. they have laser altimeters where we can refine the elevation of lunar features down to the meter range. So we understand the topography and elevation and so forth on the moon, as well as we do the Earth now. I think that probably
Questions?
brings us
Robert?
to the end.
Oh, I can take questions all night long. On the rim of that, or the straight wall,
Yeah.
30-degree angle, if
Uh-huh.
it's covered in powdery regolith, maybe they could ski down it.
Well, you may have a point there. You may have a point
May not have
there.
any skis left, but.
Yeah, yeah, well,
More friction than snow.
yeah, well,
They have some
well,
good ski wax.
the like skiing down a steep sand dune here on the Earth. Nothing I'd want to try though, because if you wipe out, it could be bad. You might not make it.
I kind of want to make a PSA for a series on Apple TV that imagined an alternate space race where the Russians got to the moon first. It's called For All Mankind.
Oh yeah, I've seen ads for it. I'm waiting for it to come out on DVD so I can see the thing.
But it seems like the moon base was focused on a crater from mining ice they're calling Shackleford.
Shackleton crater, yeah, named after the polar explorer here on Earth. Shackleton is, I think, is on the South Pole. Perry and Bird is at the North Pole. Yeah, that's one of the areas. Malaparte crater is also another one in the south where the rim is in sunlight, but the interior of it is in permanent shadow. You need sunlight for energy. And if the sun just rolls around the horizon once a month and never sets, you're in good shape. And at the same time, getting all that frozen H2O out of there, and you've got rocket fuel, you've got water, you've got oxygen. So it's a process that they're thinking very hard about how to take advantage of these resources.
If we were going to set up an observatory on the moon, optical observatories, what would be the best place to put those?
There's an issue on the moon where as the Terminator moves, there's an electrostatic effect that levitates lunar dust. It's not like wind-blown desert dust, but it does move this stuff. It can make it hot meters. And the deposits of that may be an issue with optical telescopes. But I mean, it's just like an earthly telescope. If you see the dust storm coming, you close the dome or cover the mirror. So I'm sure there's ways around it. But the moon is not the pristine, clear environment that we think it is. The moon might be a better, far side of the moon might be a better radio observatory location than an optical location, because I think enough advances have been made with adaptive optics from Earth, observatories in space at wavelengths that we can't see through the atmosphere, where we've got good space-based observatories now, but we're running out of really good radio dark places. And if we're going to continue our understanding of radio astronomy, that might be one area where the moon will work out well.
All your pictures were black and white or gray?
Yeah, my camera is a monochrome camera. Yeah, because the moon does have color. There are subtle colors. You can pick up browns and shades like that, but it's so slight that I just don't feel like fighting a color camera. So a monochrome camera is much easier to deal with. So I've just stuck with that. It's just easier for me, and I end up with a black and white picture anyway.
All right, well, thank you so much, Robert, again, for coming and speaking to us, and
my pleasure. Well, thanks for inviting me, and I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you consider paying a little bit more attention to the moon on those nights when you can't go out to Canyon of the Eagles and enjoy a little astronomy from home.
Okay, well, we don't go to Canyon of the Eagles anymore. We go to Pedernales Falls State Park and Inch Lake and our
Okay,
own dark
well,
sky
I'm a little
site
behind the
with
times.
Lampasas.
Okay, well, wherever you go to enjoy dark sky, don't
right,
think of
yeah.
that as the end of astronomy. It's
Right.
there's alternatives.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Nice.
And I want to thank everybody
Thanks,
for
Robert.
with the meeting tonight. We had to do a lot of improvising, but it seemed like it worked out okay. And
Yeah, we figured it out.
glad everybody came. Thank you for your